What happens when one of the most famous royals in the world completely loses control on live television? In just 35 seconds, a single comment would turn a friendly morning chat into the most shocking meltdown British daytime TV has ever witnessed. This is the moment Prince Harry was kicked off Lorraine Kelly's show after a heated altercation that left audiences absolutely stunned. The morning started like any other on the Lorraine show. Bright lights, cheerful music, and the warm smile of Lorraine Kelly greeting viewers from her famous yellow sofa. She had interviewed hundreds of celebrities over the years, always bringing her signature Scottish charm and genuine warmth to every conversation. Today's guest was supposed to be a major get for the show. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, had agreed to sit down for what was advertised as an intimate conversation about his latest charitable initiatives. As the cameras rolled and the live audience settled into their seats, Lorraine welcomed Harry onto the set with open arms. He walked out in a casual navy suit, waving briefly to the crowd before taking his seat across from her. The energy seemed positive at first. Lorraine, ever the professional, opened with her trademark warmth. "Welcome, welcome. It's absolutely lovely to have you here," Lorraine said, her eyes twinkling with genuine enthusiasm. "We're so excited to hear about the wonderful work you've been doing." Harry nodded, but there was something off about his demeanor. His smile seemed forced, his posture stiff. Lorraine, with decades of experience reading her guests, picked up on it immediately, but pressed forward with grace. "So, let's dive right in. You've been working on some incredible projects lately. Tell us what's been keeping you busy." Harry shifted in his seat, glancing away from Lorraine before responding. "Well, I do what I can. Important work. Work that actually matters, unlike, well..." He trailed off, but the implication hung in the air. Lorraine's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before she recovered. "Wonderful. And these causes are clearly close to your heart. What inspired you to..." "Can we skip the small talk?" Harry interrupted, his tone sharp enough to make several audience members shift uncomfortably in their seats. "I didn't come here to chat about the weather or whatever it is you usually do on this show." The studio fell silent. Lorraine blinked, clearly taken aback, but maintained her composure with the skill of a seasoned broadcaster. "Of course, we can talk about whatever you'd like. This is your platform. What would you like to discuss?" "My platform?" Harry scoffed, actually scoffed on live television. "This is barely a platform, but I suppose it's what my team could arrange on short notice." You could hear a pin drop in the studio. The camera operators glanced at each other nervously. Lorraine's producer watched from behind the scenes, finger hovering over the A commercial break button, but Lorraine subtly signaled to keep rolling. She wasn't about to let a guest rattle her after all these years. "Well, we're honored to have you regardless," Lorraine said, her voice steady, but with a slight edge creeping in. "Perhaps we could talk about your foundation work? I know our viewers would love to hear about that." "Your viewers," Harry said, air quoting with his fingers in a gesture so dismissive it made several people in the audience gasp. "Let's be honest about who watches morning television, shall we? People with nothing better to do." Lorraine's jaw tightened. The warm Scottish presenter who had charmed Britain for decades was being insulted on her own show, but she kept her cool. "Actually, we have a wonderfully diverse audience of people from all walks of life. Many of them are big supporters of your work, which is why they tuned in today." "Supporters," Harry muttered, looking around the studio with barely concealed contempt. "Right. Look, can we just get through this? I have actual important meetings after this." "Of course," Lorraine said, her patience visibly wearing thin, but still holding. "Let's talk about your recent visit to..." "Do you always interrupt people?" Harry snapped. "Or is that just your interviewing style? Because it's quite rude, actually." The audience collectively gasped. Lorraine sat back in her chair, her expression shifting from warmth to something much harder. "I apologize if you feel I interrupted you, but I was simply trying to ask a question. That is, after all, how interviews typically work. Typical, Harry said with a bitter laugh. Yes, this is all very typical. Typical questions. Typical format. Typical morning show nonsense. Do you have anything interesting to ask me, or should I just leave now? Lorraine's eyes flashed. She had interviewed prime ministers, A-list celebrities, and members of Harry's own family without ever losing her composure. But this was testing even her legendary patience. Still, she tried one more time to salvage the interview. I'd love to ask you interesting questions, she said, her voice now carrying a steely undertone. But you've barely let me finish a sentence. Why don't you tell me what you'd like to talk about? What message did you come here to share? Message? Harry leaned forward, his face twisted into a sneer. The message is that I shouldn't have to sit here and play nice with someone who makes a living off fluff pieces and celebrity gossip. You want to know about real issues? You want to know about real work? I doubt you'd understand it. That was the line. Lorraine Kelly, the woman who had conducted thousands of interviews with grace and professionalism, who had always taken the high road, had reached her limit. She straightened in her chair, looked directly into Harry's eyes, and spoke with quiet authority. Now you listen to me, she said, her Scottish accent thickening with emotion. I have been doing this job for over 30 years. I have interviewed everyone from war survivors to medical professionals, to people who have dedicated their lives to helping others. I have covered serious news stories, and yes, I've also brought joy and light into people's mornings. There is nothing wrong with that. There is nothing lesser about that. Harry opened his mouth to respond, but Lorraine held up her hand. I'm not finished, she continued, her voice rising slightly. You came onto my show, onto my set, in front of my audience, and you've done nothing but insult me. Insult this program, and insult the people who watch it. I invited you here with respect and enthusiasm, and you've shown nothing but contempt from the moment you sat down. Oh, please, Harry said, rolling his eyes. Don't act like you're some kind of victim here. You make millions talking about celebrity relationships and fashion. Don't lecture me about real work. Real work? Lorraine's voice was sharp now. Real work is showing up every single day and treating people with kindness and respect. Real work is making people feel seen and heard. Real work is using whatever platform you have, big or small, to make someone's day a little bit brighter. And real work, Harry, is conducting yourself with dignity, even when you don't particularly feel like it. The studio erupted in applause. The audience, who had been sitting in shocked silence, began clapping and cheering for their beloved host. Harry looked around, clearly surprised by the reaction, his face reddening. Are you serious right now? He said, his voice rising over the applause. You're going to let your little audience gang up on me? That's it, Lorraine said, standing up from her chair. This interview is over. I will not sit here and be spoken to this way on my own show. You can see yourself out. You can't kick me off, Harry said, also standing, his voice incredulous. Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are, Lorraine said, her voice ice cold. And right now, you're someone who's behaving absolutely appallingly. Security, please escort our guest from the building. Harry's face went from red to purple. This is outrageous. You can't do this to me. I'm a prince. And I'm Lorraine Kelly, she said simply. And this is my show. Goodbye, Harry. 2 security guards appeared from the wings, approaching Harry cautiously. The prince looked around wildly, as if expecting someone to come to his rescue, but the entire studio staff stood in solidarity with their host. You'll regret this, Harry said, pointing a finger at Lorraine. Do you have any idea the kind of trouble you've just caused for yourself? I could ruin you. One phone call and... Are you threatening me on live television? Lorraine interrupted, her eyebrows raised. Really? That's the route you're choosing to go? Harry seemed to realize his mistake, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. I'm just saying that Maybe you should think about who you're messing with. I have connections. I have influence. And I have integrity, Lorraine shot back, which is apparently more than I can say for you right now. Security, please. The guards gently but firmly took Harry by the arms. He tried to shake them off at first, his entitled attitude on full display. Get your hands off me. Do you know who I am? I said, do you know who I am? We know who you are, sir, one of the security guards said calmly, and we need you to leave the premises now. Harry turned back to Lorraine one last time as they began escorting him toward the exit. This isn't over. You've made a huge mistake. Lorraine simply shook her head, looking more disappointed than angry. The only mistake made here today was mine, thinking this interview would be a positive thing. I wish you well, Harry. I really do. But you need to leave now. As Harry was led off the stage, still protesting and making a scene, the audience erupted into another round of applause for Lorraine. She stood there for a moment, visibly shaken, but trying to maintain her composure. The cameras captured every second of the unprecedented moment. Well, Lorraine said, turning to face the camera with a weak smile, that's certainly never happened before in all my years of broadcasting. The audience laughed, a release of the tension that had been building throughout the disastrous interview. Lorraine took a deep breath, smoothed down her dress, and sat back down on her sofa. I apologize to everyone watching at home, she continued, her voice steadier now. That was not how we expected this morning to go. But I will not, and I mean this sincerely, I will not tolerate anyone, regardless of who they are or what titles they hold, coming on to this show and treating people with such disrespect. More applause from the audience. Lorraine nodded, clearly emotional, but trying to hold it together. We have a wonderful show planned for the rest of the morning, she said, consulting her notes with slightly shaking hands. And we're not going to let one bad apple spoil it. So, let's take a quick break, collect ourselves, and when we come back, we have the lovely... But before she could finish, her voice cracked slightly. She paused, took another breath, and when she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. I'm sorry, she said, wiping at her eye. I'm usually much more professional than this. It's just, in all my years, I've never been spoken to like that. Not on this show. This show is a happy place. It's a kind place. And to have someone come in and try to make it something ugly, it's just... We love you, Lorraine, someone shouted from the audience, and suddenly the entire studio was on their feet, giving her a standing ovation. Lorraine looked up, tears now flowing freely down her face, but she was smiling. Thank you, she mouthed, placing her hand over her heart. Thank you so much. The producer's voice came through her earpiece, and Lorraine nodded. Okay, we're going to take that break now, but we'll be right back. And I promise you, the rest of the show will be much more pleasant. As the show cut to commercial, the backstage area was in chaos. The producers were on their phones, the crew was buzzing about what had just happened, and Lorraine finally allowed herself to sit back and process the absolutely insane 15 minutes she had just experienced. Her producer rushed over to her, concern written all over his face. Lorraine, are you okay? That was absolutely mental. I've never seen anything like it. I'm fine, Lorraine said, though her hands were still shaking slightly. Is he gone? Is he actually off the premises? Security is making sure of it now, the producer confirmed. They said he was still complaining the whole way to his car. Something about how we'd all be sorry. Lorraine shook her head in disbelief. I genuinely don't understand what happened. The moment he sat down, it was like he was looking for a fight. Every question I asked, every attempt at conversation, he just wanted to be difficult. You handled it perfectly, one of the crew members said, coming over with a glass of water for Lorraine. Seriously, you were amazing. The way you stood up to him, the way you defended the show and the audience. Everyone's talking about it already. Indeed, social media was already exploding. clips of the altercation were being shared thousands of times, with overwhelming support for Lorraine. Viewers were praising her for standing her ground, for not allowing herself to be bullied, for showing that no one, regardless of their status or title, had the right to treat others with such contempt. Back in the studio, as they prepared to return from commercial break, Lorraine touched up her makeup and took a few more deep breaths. She had been in this business long enough to know that this moment would define the conversation for days, possibly weeks to come. But she also knew she had done the right thing. When the cameras came back on, Lorraine was composed, professional, and ready to continue her show. "Welcome back," she said with a genuine smile. "Now, let's move on to something much more enjoyable, shall we?" The rest of the show went off without a hitch. Lorraine interviewed a cookbook author who had the audience laughing with stories from her kitchen disasters. She chatted with a fashion expert about the upcoming season's trends. She even did a cooking segment where she attempted to make a traditional Scottish dish and made a delightful mess of it, much to everyone's amusement. But throughout it all, the tension from earlier still lingered in the air. During commercial breaks, Lorraine would check her phone and see the messages flooding in. Colleagues from across the broadcasting world were reaching out with support. Friends were texting to make sure she was okay. And yes, there were also messages from people connected to Harry, some apologetic, some defensive, but none that changed what had happened. As the show drew to a close, Lorraine addressed the elephant in the room one final time. "I know that the beginning of today's show was quite dramatic," she said, looking directly into the camera, "and I want to say something about that before we finish up for the day." The studio quieted down, everyone wanting to hear what she had to say. "I believe in treating everyone with kindness and respect," Lorraine continued. "That's how I was raised, and that's how I try to live my life. But I also believe that respect goes both ways. And when someone comes into your space, your workplace, your home, and treats you poorly, you have every right to stand up for yourself." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I don't care if you're a prince or a pauper. If you're sitting on this sofa, you're a guest in our home, and in our home, we treat each other well. That's not negotiable. That's not something I'm willing to compromise on. Not for ratings. Not for a big name. Not for anything." The audience applauded again, and Lorraine smiled warmly at them. "Thank you all for being here today, both in the studio and at home. Your support means the world to me. It really does. And I promise you, tomorrow we'll be back with more fun, more laughter, and hopefully, much less drama." As the show's theme music played and the credits rolled, Lorraine waved to the camera, that familiar warm smile back on her face. But as soon as the cameras stopped rolling, she let out a long, exhausted sigh. "Well," she said to her team, "that's one for the history books." Her producer came over and gave her a hug. "You were incredible. Seriously, Lorraine, the way you handled that, the grace you showed while still standing your ground, it was masterful." "I didn't feel very graceful," Lorraine admitted. "I felt angry. Really, properly angry. And I almost never get angry on this show." "You had every right to be angry," another producer chimed in. "What he said, the way he behaved, it was completely out of line. Anyone would have reacted the way you did. Most people would have reacted much worse." Lorraine nodded, but she still looked troubled. "I keep replaying it in my head, wondering if there was something I could have said differently, some way I could have salvaged it." "Lorraine, no," her producer said firmly. "You did everything right. You tried to be welcoming. You tried to steer the conversation in a positive direction. You gave him multiple chances to course correct. He chose not to take any of them. That's on him, not you." As the studio emptied out and the crew began breaking down the set, Lorraine sat alone on her famous yellow sofa for a moment, processing everything that had happened. In all her years of broadcasting, through thousands of interviews and countless unexpected moments, she had never experienced anything quite like this. She thought about the young prince who had walked onto her stage that morning, so full of anger and entitlement. She wondered what had happened to make him behave that way, what pain or frustration he might be carrying that caused him to lash out so viciously. But then she reminded herself that understanding someone's pain doesn't mean accepting their bad behavior. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from a fellow broadcaster, someone she had known for decades. "Just watched what happened on your show. You're a bloody hero. That's how you handle a bully. Proud of you." Lorraine smiled at the message. She didn't feel like a hero. She just felt like someone who had reached their limit and finally said, "Enough is enough." As she gathered her things and prepared to leave the studio, members of the crew stopped by to offer words of support. The makeup artist gave her a hug. The camera operator gave her a thumbs up. Even the security guards who had escorted Harry out came by to tell her they were proud of how she handled the situation. "In all my years doing this job," one of the guards said, "I've never seen someone stand up to entitled behavior quite like that. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't lose your cool. You just stated your boundaries and stuck to them. That takes real strength." Lorraine thanked him, feeling genuinely touched by all the support. As she finally made her way out of the studio and toward her car, she realized that while the morning had started as a disaster, it had ended with a powerful reminder of why she loved this job. She loved it because of the amazing team she worked with, who had her back no matter what. She loved it because of the audience, who had stood up and applauded when she needed it most. And she loved it because it gave her a platform to show people that kindness matters, that respect matters, and that no one, absolutely no one, has the right to treat others poorly. The drive home gave Lorraine time to decompress. She turned off the radio, not wanting to hear the inevitable commentary about what had happened, and just drove in silence, watching the familiar streets of London pass by her window. When she finally got home, she poured herself a cup of tea, sat down in her favorite chair, and allowed herself to really feel everything she had been holding in. The shock of how the interview had gone south so quickly, the anger at being spoken to so dismissively, the hurt of having her life's work belittled and mocked, and finally, the pride she felt in standing up for herself and her team. Her phone continued to buzz with messages, but she ignored it for now. There would be time later to respond to everyone, to read all the supportive messages, to deal with whatever fallout might come from the incident. For now, she just needed to sit with her thoughts and process the absolutely surreal morning she had just experienced. As the afternoon sun streamed through her windows, Lorraine found herself thinking about all the interviews she had conducted over the years. The nervous first-time guests who she had helped relax. The grieving families she had spoken with such sensitivity and care. The excited authors, the passionate activists, the talented performers. Thousands upon thousands of conversations, each one treated with the same respect and genuine interest. And then there was today. Today would be remembered not for what she had learned about her guest, but for what she had revealed about herself. That beneath the warm smile and the cheerful demeanor, there was a backbone of steel. That kindness should never be mistaken for weakness. That being nice doesn't mean being a doormat. She thought about the young people who might have been watching, who might have seen what happened and learned something valuable. That it's okay to stand up for yourself. That you don't have to tolerate being treated poorly, no matter who the person is. That setting boundaries isn't rude, it's necessary. The next morning, Lorraine would return to her yellow sofa. She would greet her audience with that same warm smile. She would conduct interviews with grace and professionalism. But everyone who watched would know, beyond any doubt, that Lorraine Kelly was nobody's pushover. She was a woman who knew her worth, who valued respect, and who wasn't afraid to demand it. And really, in a world that often rewards bad behavior and excuses entitlement, wasn't that exactly the kind of example people needed to see? The sun continued its journey across the sky as Lorraine sat in her living room, tea growing cold in her cup, reflecting on a morning that had started like any other and ended in a way she never could have imagined. But as shocking as it had been, as uncomfortable as those moments were, she wouldn't take back her decision to end the interview. Because at the end of the day, respect isn't something you should have to beg for or negotiate for. It's something every person deserves, from the newest intern to the most seasoned broadcaster. And if standing up for that respect meant making waves, meant causing a scene, meant kicking a prince off her show, then so be it. Lorraine Kelly had spent decades being kind. Today, she had shown that being kind doesn't mean being weak. It means knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone, prince or otherwise, diminish it.